next speaker is Joy, who I think looks beautiful today. She's wearing a shirt and a dress. I'm going to call it a shirtess. She's a 2016 Mo alumni, and she now runs Joy at Large, which is her own company, which helps teams do collaboration. And her talk today is going to be learning, unlearning, and relearning. So please put your hands together for Charlotte. Sorry, that was a blunder. Joy Blundell.
Confusing the only two Asian girls in the room. Hello, everyone. Following the black man joke, yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Joy. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm also quite terrified. I was on the other side of all of this attention 2 years ago, and I think I was sitting probably where you're sitting. A lot has changed in the last 2 years, and today I returned because I wanted to share something that really inspired me 2 years ago, and also I think summarizes all the things that happened in the last couple of years. So the thing that inspired me a couple of years ago was a quote, and it was a quote by a man called Alvin Toffler, and he's a futurist, so he's someone whose work is to study about the future, and he said this. He said that the illiterate of the 21st century are not those who are unable to read and write. They are those who are unable to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And this, I found, was a very powerful quote. I came across it at work at first, and it's something I apply to the work which I do. So I facilitate teams normally in financial services who innovate. And really, what is innovation other than learning, unlearning, and relearning? But today, I wanted to share my personal experience with this process. And in that, I want to share what I learned. I want to share with you what I unlearned. And I want to share with you what has been going on since relearning. So just to give you an idea of what I learned, let me take you to sort of a tiny Southeast Asian country called Singapore. And that was where I was born. My sister and I were born in Singapore. And then we were brought over to a less tinier Southeast Asian country called Brunei. And it was, I think, our dad's work that brought us there. I think, for those who don't know Singapore or Brunei very much, they're known for their crazy rich Asians. We were the poorer 2/3 of that description. We were definitely Asian, all four of us. And things got pretty crazy for us at one point. So my Asian experience was growing up with a tiger mom. I think I had to learn a lot of musical instruments. I had to get good grades. For the large part of my years growing up, I wore really thick glasses, and yes, and also sported a bowl haircut for a long period of time. So safe to say, I definitely wasn't the coolest kid in school in Asia or anywhere else in the world. I was picked on twice in school, so maybe that was why. And crazy started for us when I turned 11. When I was 11 years old, I remember being with my sister in our parents' bedroom, and we were waiting for news because my dad had been admitted to hospital. And we had someone pick us up and bring us to hospital, and that was when we entered a room full of people who were crying. And that was also when we found out that our dad had passed away suddenly. And that changed a lot for our family. My mom used to stay at home to take care of us, and now she had to work and provide for us. And one thing I remember from that experience in my 11-year-old self was, I don't think I fully grasped the reality of what had happened, but I remember feeling really confused. And I also remember feeling extremely sad. And what I knew was that I didn't want to experience this again. And I tried to figure out in my own sort of 11-year-old heart and mind that nothing lasts forever. And that was a story I told myself for a very long time. And it was a story that a lesson that I brought with me when I came to London. I heard stories today of people who are not from London trying to get here. And I think a friend summarized living London this way. He said it's like fast food city. People are coming in and out so fast. Things are changing really quickly. Places are moving around so much. And the more I experienced these changes, the more I had to borrow from this lesson. And eventually I built a kind of boat for myself. It was my boat of lessons. And up on this front of the boat was christened, "Nothing lasts forever." And I kept myself in my little boat. And each time the waves would come and hit me, this boat, and the more this boat held up, the more attached I became to this boat. And so over time, I just knew that my role was not to rock this boat and to try to stay as still as possible. Now that you have an idea of how I grew up and what I learned, I want to tell you what I had to unlearn. Something I realized is that unlearning usually needs a wake-up call. And I think that's something we heard in each of the stories today. There was a wake-up call that each of the speakers experienced. And my wake-up call happened a couple of years ago. I was at my desk in the afternoon at work, and I got an email. And this email was from Australia, and it was giving me news. It gave me news about my best friend growing up. I think she was my best friend when I was 11 years old. My best friend passing away from brain cancer. And I legged it to Brisbane, and I arrived a couple of days before she passed away. And years later, after having learned what I learned, I remember being really heartbroken and devastated because she and I were the same age. And also, I felt so burdened that she didn't live the life that she had wanted to because it was cut short. And so coming back home, I remember dealing with the grief and the questions, but also suddenly carrying this heavy weight on me, at which said, there are no more excuses. And at the time in my life, I was in a career that I knew I didn't want to do, but I was also, again, afraid to move, to do anything about. I was in a relationship that wasn't working out, and I was afraid to do anything about that. I was afraid to end it. And what had happened, I guess at that point, it felt like my little boat had sprung a leak, and this hole was getting bigger and bigger. And because I knew that this was the only place for me to be safe, I was frantically trying to take the water out. And it happened over a few months. And as a friend very eloquently expressed the feeling, I came to the end of my strength. I came to the end of my strength. I knew that I wanted to be someone and do something else, but I really needed help unlearning. And so unlearning for me came in a few different ways. The first was really catalyzed at the last conference 2 years ago, MOEvement. I think, like you, it was really the first time that I had heard stories of people unlearning. It's a very unpopular thing to talk about because when your boat falls apart and breaks, firstly, it's bad news, and also it's not something people enjoy talking about. So for me, having those stories told was like entering a room full of doors and people showing how they had unlocked these doors and stepped through them and got onto the other side that they wanted to with much difficulty. And it energized me. At the same time, I had a coffee catch-up with a mentor of mine, Mela, who's absolutely wonderful. And when I was describing to her all the things I was going through, she gave me a shape, which I thought, which I wanted to share with you. So she said, Joy, you're here right now. And this is where you want to be. The only way from here to the other side is by hitting rock bottom. And the longer you stay on this side, the more likely you're going to fall into the zone of depression. And I thought that was I think I understood what she'd meant. And on hindsight, to me, that zone of depression was basically sinking in your boat as it was springing that leak. And also it meant letting go. It meant letting go of everything that I had learned that kept me safe. And finally, I think really the linchpin in my whole of my unlearning journey was the work which I did with my coach, Jess Heading. So before the MOEvement conference 2 years ago, I had no idea what the Mo Foundation did. I had no idea what coaching was about either. So that really unlocked a lot of things for me. And with Jess, I think, Jeff, you summarized coaching so beautifully. I didn't know I was in a boat before I started my coaching sessions. We together found that the feeling I was in a boat, or the feeling that I was getting was that of being in a boat. And then we found out what the name of this boat was. And to unlearn something, you need to know what you've learned to unlearn it. And so with now the Nothing Lasts Forever story, she kind of helped to unlock it with two keys, which were questions. The first was, how does this serve you? And the second was, how does this hinder you? And with that, the boat spectacularly fell apart. And with that, wonderfully too, we worked together to construct out of one of the wooden planks a board that became a surfboard. And we moved our story from Nothing Lasts Forever to Let's Ride the Wave. And that to me was such a powerful experience because it began the process of relearning for me. It meant that I could now, using this new awesome metaphor, change my relationship with fear, change my relationship with pain, and also change my relationship with change itself. And also, I think one thing worth noting is, I think without the surfboard, I wouldn't have been able to reach the other side. And I knew what the other side of me was. All I wanted to do was to be free, hence the U sign, the hands up. I wanted to be free to be myself. I wanted to be free to hold my talents. I wanted to be free to create the career I wanted. I wanted to be free to care about the people who I love. I wanted to be able to spend more time with people who I cared about. And also what I love most about the relearning process is that it's extremely kind. We've learned that the unlearning process is human. Machines can learn, but it's very painful and hard to unlearn. Only human beings can do that. And also, the relearning process it's a kind process. It encourages you to be kind to yourself. In the last 2 years of setting up my business, a lot of challenges have come my way. I struggled with intense anxiety. I struggled with questioning my own self-worthiness, especially when you're doing things on your own. I struggled with burning out with work. I also encountered a Me Too experience. And the ghost of the old boat sometimes would kind of rise up and tell me, you should have known, you should have known this, how could you have ended up here again? Or, why did you choose to do this? But I remembered my commitment to relearning. And with relearning, it meant riding the wave. It meant allowing the pains of disappointment, the pains of betrayal, the pains of restlessness to visit me. And with each visit, I could learn about them. I learned about how it made my body feel. I tried to learn what triggered them, what invited them, and I tried to learn also what made them come less and less over time. Another wonderful thing about relearning is that it's very forgiving. So it accepts that we learned what we learned because it helped us once upon a time. It also accepts that life is really disruptive and unpredictable, and there are some things that we really couldn't prepare ourselves for. And also lastly, it just trusts that we're going to be okay. And since making the shift, I've been able to experience life in quite a different way. I don't mean for all the stories to be doom and gloom, but now I'm able to pursue my craft. I'm able to pursue a career which I love, and I'm able to spend quite a bit of time with my friends and care for them. And I'm surrounded, I've opened up just wonderful, it's just kind of almost like letting in all these things that were waiting for me on the other end and being part of communities like this and being inspired. I think most surprising of all is inviting the experience of falling in love, which I think my old boat would not have allowed me to do, because being in that old boat meant also not allowing myself to be this happy. And there's a wonderful poem by David White called The True Love, which I wanted to share with you to close. He wrote this poem for a group of nuns that were going through organizational change. So let that sit in your mind for a while. Just let this sit in your mind for a while. And I think, as we know with nuns, I don't think he was talking about a romantic relationship, but I think he was trying to give them a sense of destination, a sense of being permitted to arrive at this new unknown destination. So this is the part, a small part of his wonderful poem. So let me read this to you. There is a faith in loving fiercely the one who is rightfully yours, especially if you've waited years, and especially if part of you never believed you could deserve this loved and beckoning hand held out to you in this way. Because finally, after all the struggle and all these years, you don't want to anymore. You've simply had enough of drowning. And you want to live, and you want to love, and you will walk across any territory and darkness, however fluid, however dangerous, to take the one hand you know belongs in yours. And the hope is, as we've heard before, we always have a choice. And if you've had enough of drowning like I did, and believe that you deserve the life you want to live, I would invite you also to commit to 21st century literacy by learning, unlearning, and relearning. Thank you.
Love, falling in love. Wonder how that feels. Anyway, questions and answers. Any questions for lovely Joy?
That was beautiful and so inspirational, Joe. Really was, so thank you. I'd be really intrigued, what's your business? What is it that you are doing now?
Sure. So I left that, I had it in my speech, but I forgot to mention it. So I build workshops. Basically, I build learning, unlearning, relearning experiences for companies that want to reach a certain outcome. So I do that for financial services. I do that for just teams and innovation across industries. Yeah.
Can I ask you a personal question about
Yes.
your coaching experience a couple of years back?
Yes.
What can you remember was the question that allowed you to get from my boat is sinking, I don't want to leave it, to I'm going to ride the wave?
I think it was, I shared the two questions that she offered to me. And I mean, in sort of, I really had to cut things down, but I tend to do a lot of thinking on my own. And so with these two prompts, we somehow found that there were certain things that didn't need to be so black and white. And with that, also, I think I had realized that that was the way I had responded to change. One other thing I also left out in my speech, because I think I was just talking off the top of my head, is how in life there are choices, and I lived most of my life shutting out a lot of things because I was fearful of the pain of change. And instead, this time it was really like free falling forward, so I could get to the other side. And I think as it was captured in the zone of depression, that's where I didn't want to be anymore. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay.
And just through what I remembered you saying is, how does it serve you and how does it hinder you? Which I think we can all ask ourselves regarding things. Aisha, did you have a question?
I think you sort of answered it, but I'm just wondering what it meant for you to hit rock bottom and how you changed your relationship with fear.
Thank you for asking these questions because they were all in my speech. I was going to go over time, but somehow I've managed. So in this shape, rock bottom looks like a very nice gradual fall. Because I was advised to do it quickly, rock bottom was like this. I quit my job, I broke up, I started my business, I moved homes. In the space of probably a couple of months. And rock bottom, what surprised me the most about it, I think I don't want to glamorize rock bottom because it is a very, very scary place to be, especially when you're still in your boat. But rock bottom surprisingly, it feels liberating because you have nothing left. And you stop caring about what people think. And you also have now time alone and with people who help you out and inspire you to really relearn and reinvent the life as you know it. Yeah. I don't advise anyone to seek it out. That's not what I mean by this journey. But what I mean is if you feel like you're suspended between where you want to be and where you are, and you're unhappy about it or makes you feel very uncomfortable, I think that was the advice that was given to me. And one of the feedback that I've been receiving, because who measures how successful you are when you're freelancing or you're setting up a business? But I've often heard from people, wow, you've done this really fast. How did you get your business up in X time? I think that might have something to do with it. So, yeah. Yeah, it's all right. Thank you for your question.
Is there any more questions?
To ask, I love the concept of unlearning and relearning, but would you, for me, having heard this kind of for the first time, it sounds quite difficult. Would you advise to do it with someone outside, like a coach, or is it something you think you can just do by yourself with your own life, and if so, how would you advise to go?
That's a really great question. So I was very unconscious of all of these things. And I'm sure we've gone through these journeys over and over and over again in our lives. And sometimes they're all packed together so it looks like a haystack. That's really what life looks like. As a facilitator and answering as a facilitator, that's really our role when we come to an organization that wants to go through this journey. And I think for me, it was facilitated by external events, so coming to the conference. But I think the real inner work of learning about yourself is key to figuring out that journey. And having a coach, so I had to discover this first with the help of a coach, but it's something you can over time also know how to do yourself. So if you're not sure how to do it and it's a real black box to you, coaching is like amazing. Yeah.
Do we have one more question for Joy?
Just one question. So you gave a very personal story of how you go through that process and see rock bottom. If you're trying to get an organisation to do that, does the organisation need to hit rock bottom as well, or can it guide itself through without?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think rock bottom does not mean going bankrupt. So I don't mean rock bottom. I mean, I think for an organization, rock bottom isn't an economic measure. I think rock bottom is, it's like a collective, it's like the experience that happened to me, but collectively. That kind of experience needs to happen. And sometimes it might be personal, so I think there are coaches that lean into figuring out what team dynamics are like, leadership, etc. But there are also people who are there to do it from a content perspective. So there are people who help to shock or really start to expose the wrong assumptions they have about the industry or the strategy that they're using. And through that, by showing them what they've learned, you can then start bringing them through the journey of unlearning and relearning again. So there are different approaches to it. Yeah. So you're grinning so widely. I'm curious about what you're grinning about. Okay.
Shall we give Joy a round?
Thank you. Thank you.